Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Wales. I'm a developer programs engineer on the Google Analytics Developer Relations team. And today I'm going to be talking all about campaigns and attribution for Android. And just to give you a look at the agenda, so first I'm going to talk about a little bit about how campaigns work generally in Universal Analytics. In our V2 SDKs, which is what I'll be talking about today, those are all built on top of Universal Analytics. So what's true for campaigns and attributions generally in Universal Analytics is going to be true for Android as well. So we'll start there. I'll then walk through how Google Play campaign measurement works. This is really the main use case for most people in doing attribution on Android. So tracking installs from Google Play Store and being able to attribute those back to campaigns or other marketing efforts, etc. So I'll walk through a little bit about, show you how that works. I'll show you how to implement that. It's actually really simple. I'll show you how you can actually test it to make sure it's working before you publish your app, which is a good thing always. Then I'll also show you a couple common issues that I hear about a lot that you can hopefully avoid by taking a look at in this GDL. And then thirdly, I'll talk about general campaign measurement. And this is a little bit of a less common use case, but it's for cases where you have cases where you want to do attribution after the app is already installed. So if you have deep links going into your app and you want to be able to attribute the opens of that app because of those deep links back to those sources, you can do that with general campaign management. I'll show you how that works as well. So let's jump right in. So let's start with campaigns and Universal Analytics generally. So as probably most of you know, and this has been the case for some time, there's really 5 main campaign dimensions. And these are source, medium, campaign, content, and keyword. And these 5 dimensions can be used to sort of describe any of your marketing campaigns. In this example, I'm showing you like an AdWords campaign, a CPC campaign. But it could be used to do, track marketing emails or newsletters or, links from your website to Google Play Store, whatever it is. You can use these 5 dimensions and give them values that describe the source. So just a little sort of primer on how campaigns work in Universal Analytics. It's a little bit different than how it was before. So you can see here, we have, you'll see all these gray dots on the bottom. These represent sessions with your application or with your website, whatever it is. We're speaking broadly here. So each of these dots here represents one user interaction with a site or an app and contains a bunch of views and events and e-commerce and other things. And we're looking at this for a given property ID and client ID. So the way this works is once you send campaign information to GA, it's going to stay valid. So every time I come back, and as long as I have the same property ID and client ID, and by the way, this will also be true for user ID when that's available. I'm going to keep having my sessions attributed back to this original campaign information until one of 2 things happen. Either there's new campaign info received, so if I click through on another ad, for example, and I come back, or if the campaign timeout period expires. So you can configure, and I'll show you just in a sec how to do this, but you can configure at the property level how long you want campaign information to stay valid. So by default, it's 6 months. So if I clicked on an ad 6 months ago and I get up to 6 months and a day, I'll show up as direct after that point because the timeout's been expired. Now you can change that around, so I'll show you that in a sec how you do that. So when one of those things happens, that's when the campaign information stops being valid. So for Android, which is what we're talking about today, what this really means in practice is that when you click, suppose you track, for example, an ad that drives someone to Google Play Store that then downloads your app, and that's the smiley face mobile device right there. What this means is that once you get that original campaign information in there at the time of install, all the subsequent downstream user activity like screen views, events, goals, in-app revenue, etc., all that's going to get attributed back to that original ad until either there's either new campaign information received or that campaign information times out. Now, most of the time, unless you're doing this general campaign management where you want to track like deep links into your app or something else, most of the time you're only ever going to really have that install information, so the original campaign that drove the install, and then the campaign information is really not going to change too much. Furthermore, the client ID and the property ID are going to stay constant. The client ID is generated at the time that the SDK first, basically when your app first runs, we're going to generate a random client ID. So as long as the user doesn't uninstall the app, you can really expect that original install information to be constant all the way up until whenever that campaign information times out. So with that, I just wanted to show you really quickly how you can configure that campaign timeout period. So by default, it's going to be 6 months. But if you want, for example, if somebody installs your app and keeps it around for a year, for example, if you still want everything they're doing in terms of events, goals, e-commerce, etc., everything after that 6 months period, so 6 to 12 months, if you want all of that information still attributed back to that original campaign, you should go into your property settings and change this campaign timeout. By the way, you'll only see this campaign timeout period if you have a Universal Analytics enabled property. So if you're already using V2 of the SDKs, you already have one, so that shouldn't be a problem. Cool. So now we've covered like a little bit about how campaigns work in Universal Analytics in general and what that's going to mean for Android. I'm going to show you a little bit about how Google Play campaign measurement works. It's actually pretty simple. So the way it's going to work is that any ads or marketing efforts that you have, you can link to Google Play from those things, right? You're going to link to your app's download page, or your app's whatever page on Google Play Store with the download button. And you attach this refer parameter. And as the value of that parameter, it's going to be a URL encoded string of these UTM tags: UTM source, UTM medium, term, content, campaign. And these all equate to those 5 dimensions I showed you earlier. And that's going to send the user to your app's page on Google Play Store. So in this example, I'm showing Google Drive. What happens from there, if they choose to install the app right then, what happens there is that the Google Play Store app on the device is going to broadcast this install refer intent. And as part of that refer intent, it's going to grab the, that refer parameter, the value of it, from the link that you use to send people there. And it's going to include that as a string extra in that bundle with the intent. So the way this normally works, if you do a standard GA implementation, is that you'll have a analytics broadcast receiver, and I'll show you how to implement that in a second. And that's going to be able to receive that intent, and it's going to store that refer information. And then when the app actually runs, the SDK is going to send that out with the first hit that's dispatched. And that's how your campaign information is going to get back to GA. And then everything that the user does from then on is going to be attributed back to that original campaign source, whatever was in that refer parameter. Right, so you'll see in your Google Play sources, this is just kind of a look, you'll see something that looks like this, where you have the source and medium, and you have new user sessions, duration, all the metrics and dimensions and stuff you want to use will be available there. So really quick, there's basically 4 steps to doing an implementation on this, and it's pretty straightforward. First, obviously, you need to add the Analytics SDK to your project. Then you need to add this GA broadcast receiver. Then this is optional, really, but it's a good idea to test the implementation just to make sure it works. A lot of times, if it doesn't work and you push the app to Google Play Store, then you've got to push it all over again just to start getting campaign information, and that's a pain, so it's good to test. And then 4, to generate your Google Play URLs. So the URLs you're going to be using to send people to your app's page on Google Play. So to add the Analytics SDK, it's pretty straightforward. I'll show you really quickly just an example. I use the Notepad example. So if you have the Android SDK installed, you should be able to create this sample app as well. And I'm just doing, if you want to do a really basic analytics implementation, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to go ahead and create a folder called libs and add this, our jar file, the Analytics v2 jar file. At that point, you can go in and you basically just tag, sort of just like you would on the web. So in this example, I have the notes list and also the note editor activities I tagged with just these simple tags. So you can see I'm overriding the onStart and onStop methods and adding the easy tracker, activity start, and activity stop methods. So you'd want to do that across all activities that you're using. And that's probably the most basic way to install, to implement GA. Of course, you can make it much more complex, but just for the sake of this example, that's all you need to do as the bare minimum. And then the next step, just to be sure, you want to make sure you have the permissions in your Android manifest file to use the internet and access the network state. And then also, the nice thing about Easy Tracker is that you can create this analytics XML file, and here you can manage all your configuration settings. So your property ID, whether or not you want to do auto activity tracking, turning on and off debug mode, etc. So that's just a really basic implementation. Obviously, you can do a much more advanced one, but I just want to give you a quick sense of what that would look like. So once the SDK is implemented, however you're going to do that, the next step is to make sure that the broadcast receiver actually gets implemented as well. And this is going to be the receiver that takes that install refer intent that the Google Play Store is going to send to your app. So really quickly, what that's going to look like. Let's see. If we go to the Android manifest file, you can see I've already added it here. And you can get this from the developer site, or it's in the Java doc as well. But basically, it's a service and the receiver. And what the service is going to do is when that install refer intent comes through, the service is actually going to write that refer information to a file, and then when the app actually is running and fully installed, the SDK is going to read from that file and send it whatever information's there, if any, with the first hit. So that's it. So just copy and pasting this receiver and the service into your Android manifest file. And then technically you should be good to go. At that point, unless you have a more advanced implementation, which I'll go into in a sec, you should be able to receive that intent, and the SDK should be able to read it and send it with hits. But with that said, oh, sorry, let me just show you a blown-up view, just in case you couldn't see it on my screen. And again, this is available on the developer site. So if you go to developers.google.com/analytics and go to Android, you'll be able to get this in our campaigns dev guide there. So the next step would be testing the implementation. This, again, is always a good idea to make sure it's working. Again, you don't want to have to push your application twice to Google Play Store just to get the campaign measurement working. So I'm going to show you one way to test to make sure this is working. And what it's going to do is basically you're going to broadcast that install refer intent to your application from the Android debug bridge command line tool. And you can include the refer extra, and you can give it some sample UTM parameters and values. And then you can just see, you can run your application and make sure, because it'll print it to logs whether or not it found campaign information. So you can use this process to make sure that the receiver is properly configured, that it's going to receive that intent, and that the SDK is picking up the campaign information that's there. So there's basically 3 steps to this. First one is once you're ready to test, you want to install your application on the device that you're using to test. So it could be an emulator, or it could be a connected device. Yeah, and it's a pretty simple command. You just use whatever your path to ADB is, the Android debug bridge. I think for most people they have a symlink, so it's usually just ADB install and then the path to your APK file. Step 2 is make sure the app isn't running. That causes problems with the way that the Google Play broadcast receiver and the service are designed to work. So just make sure the app isn't running. Just install it, but don't actually open it. And then the third is we're actually going to broadcast the intent. Right, so again, it's kind of the same thing. You're going to have your path to ADB. Then you broadcast the intent. You have to specify your package name and also the path to the receiver. And then you tack on this string extra that's named refer. And then you can add your UTM parameters and values. You don't really need to do too much here. You can actually just do UTM source equals whatever value you want. That's really the only required field. And that's good enough for the purposes of testing. And what you're going to be able to see in logs is that if the campaign information is found, you'll see a message like this. So you'll see GA, the SDK, spitting things out to logs, and one of those things is going to say campaign found. It'll say UTM source, and it should have the value that you broadcast to it. If it does not say campaign found, it'll say campaign not found. And if that's the case, it's usually either a problem with the receiver. It might not be implemented, or it's not implemented correctly. You might have multiple receivers, and I'll talk about that in a second. So with the install refer intent, you can actually only receive it in one broadcast receiver. So if you already have one, and then you try to paste the analytics receiver in, the analytics receiver might not actually get called in that case. Or the broadcast wasn't actually successful. So you'd want to go back and just make sure that you're actually seeing. ADB will tell you that the broadcast was successfully done. So you should go back and double check that. So that's the first 3 steps. So you've implemented the Analytics SDK, you've added the broadcast receiver, you've tested the implementation, so hopefully everything looks good there. And then the last step is just to generate those Google Play URLs. And this is really easy to do. Again, the format is basically, it's going to be the link to your app's Google Play Store page. So it's Google Play Store, and then you have this ID equals your package name. And then you're going to have this refer parameter. And the value of that refer parameter is going to be a URL encoded campaign parameter string. So a string of these UTM source equals whatever, UTM medium equals test medium, etc., all separated by ampersands. And we actually have a tool on the developer site, so developers.google.com/analytics. If you go to the campaign dev guide for Android, we have a Google Play URL builder, so you can just pop in your package name, the campaign source, medium term, content, etc., and we'll generate that URL for you. And just so you know, if you're using AdWords or DoubleClick and you have these click IDs like GCL ID or DCL ID, you can pass those values as well in that refer parameter. So you just enable auto tagging, for example, for AdWords, and send users to Google Play Store, and that should be sufficient. And then the SDK is able to pick up on that click ID, and then we'll join it with the ads data so we can bring in your campaign, the term, etc., all automatically. Cool. So that's basically it. It's a pretty straightforward implementation. You can test it, and we have the tools to help you generate the Google Play URLs as well. So next I want to talk about 2 common issues. One of which is that people oftentimes will see more sessions attributed to direct/none, so source direct, medium none, than they expect. And to be sure, you're definitely going to see a lot. It might even be the most, like the top source for you. That may be normal. It may be that nothing's working, everything's working as expected. But one reason why it might be higher than you expect, and this is just a view of what that would look like in your reports. One reason why it might be higher is because of the way that the Google Play Store app works in terms of that URL and the refer parameter. So if we go back to this example where you drive from an ad via that link with the refer parameter to the apps page on Google Play Store, as long as they choose to download right from there, it'll be fine. And that refer parameter will get bundled up and sent off with that intent, and everything works as I just described. The tricky part comes when people actually, if users move away from that page, for example, if they go out to the Google Play homepage and then they navigate back to your app download page and then install, the refer information is gone at that point. So that install is going to be attributed to direct/none. And that's just kind of the way it works on Google Play Store at the moment. So you're only ever going to get campaign information for those users who follow one of your links that's tagged, land on Google Play, and then download right there. If they do anything else, if they navigate around Google Play Store, that refer information gets lost. We don't keep it with them and then send it on when they download. So that's usually the main reason why you see more direct none than you might expect. But with that said, for most people, as far as I've seen, direct none is usually the top. So usually most people are discovering the application by going directly, or they already know what it's called, So it's not unusual to see that at the top, but this is one reason why it might be higher than you expect. Another common issue, the second one that I alluded to earlier, is when you have multiple receivers that are all trying to receive that install refer intent. So the thing about that intent is that it can only be received by one broadcast receiver. So you want to make sure that you don't run into this situation where you already have, for example here, you already have some receiver that's receiving that install refer intent and doing some work with it. And then you just copy and paste in the Google Analytics receiver. And this will either not work or it won't work reliably. Because again, only one of these is going to get called. So the solution for this, it's pretty straightforward. Sad face emoticon. You don't want to do this. What you want to do instead is, at least in the last example, you would take the receiver that you already had, and you do whatever work you're going to do with the install refer intent, right? And then at the end, as soon as you're done with all the work that you're going to do otherwise, you can just instantiate this Google campaign tracking receiver. So it's just campaign tracking receiver. You can call its on receive, and then pass it the context and intent. So you're just doing, you're not adding a new receiver to your Android manifest file. You're just going to take what you already have, and then when you're done with whatever you're doing with that intent, just instantiate the GA receiver and call on receive and pass it the intent. And that'll be good enough. Yep, and that's exactly what you want to do. So at this point, you should know how to implement Google Play campaign measurement. You can implement it with the broadcast receiver. You can test it, know how to generate the Google Play URLs. And the two things you want to avoid are forgetting that if people move around Google Play Store, that their refer information is lost. And that's just the way it works currently. And then two, that if you already have a receiver, you'll want to go ahead and just add the, make sure you instantiate the GA and receiver as part of the work that your receiver does, rather than registering both and having them called inconsistently. So we have a couple resources that I recommend everybody check out if they have more questions about this, or if you're going to do an implementation, you want to have some documentation next to you. The first is our Campaign Measurement Developer Guide. So that's at the developer site. And yeah, if you just look on the left nav, it'll be under the Android SDK and then Campaigns. We also have that Google Play URL Builder, and that tool is actually embedded into the Campaign Dev Guide as well. And then we also recently just published a testing guide, so you'll see all of the ADB commands that I just used. We published all those as well, so it's in our solutions section. So you can go check that out, and you should have everything you need to implement and test. So that's Google Play campaign measurement. That's the primary use case for doing attribution on Android. But I did want to talk just really briefly about general campaign management. So this would be, again, for cases where you have some intent that's opening up your application. Maybe you're deep linking into it. Maybe it's some other app. Whatever it is, you have some intent that's opening your application after it's already been installed, and you want to be able to do attribution there. So that's what general campaign measurement is for. And just to show you a quick example of how this works, there's a helper method in the tracker class that's called setCampaign. And setCampaign basically just takes a query, a string of those campaign parameters, so UTM source, UTM medium, all of that stuff. So if you can get that parameter string into your application, again, it's usually via some intent, you can just pass it to that tracker setCampaign, and if it's valid, we'll set that new campaign information, and the next hit that goes out will include that campaign information. And then that session and any subsequent sessions will be attributed to that new campaign information. So this example is just a really quick, just a demonstration of how you could do this in a sample activity. So basically, you just get the intent that started the activity. You get the URI from the intent. And then you can just check to see, again, UTM source is the only required parameter. So you could just check to see if UTM source is present in that URI or not. And if it is present, you can assume that there's valid campaign information there. So you can just get your tracker. Here I use EasyTracker, the getTracker method of EasyTracker, but if you have a reference to your tracker any other way, you can do that. And then set campaign, and then you just pass it that string of campaign parameters. And just to show you what's going to happen, to return to this slide, what will have happened is that you will have, up until that point, all the sessions that the user had in that application will be attributed to whatever was sent through at install time. And then as soon as you do that next attribution step, so if it's a deep link or whatever else, as soonest you call set campaign and then send a hit, all of that session and any subsequent sessions will be tagged with that new source. So that does mean that if you do this, so if for example, if you tagged a deep link and then you set the campaign information that way, it means their subsequent activity, if it's e-commerce or events or whatever, are now going to be attributed to that new source, and you won't have that attribution back to the original install source. So that's just something to be aware of. Usually that's what you want, but just so you know, you won't have access. There is no like install campaign dimension where you can always see back to whatever the original install campaign was. Cool. That's pretty much it. So we talked about a couple things: Google Play, campaign measurement, how to implement it, and test it, generate those URLs, some common pitfalls to avoid. And then also the second use case, mainly for Android, is that general campaign measurement, which I showed you, which you can do really easily with that set tracker helper method. And that should cover most cases for doing Android attribution and campaigns. Cool. Let me just check to see if we have any questions on the Dory. Great. OK. Well, if you guys have any questions, you can always catch me on G+. You can do g+.2/awales, and that'll take you right to my page. And I hope to see you around on the next Analytics Live. Thanks.